Hi, my name is Darren, co-founder of P4P, Passion for Performance, the leading e-assessment and e-portfolio platform in Africa. As part of my journey, I have been selected onto the PSET Post-School Education and Training Cloud launch group. This is an initiative that's been set up by JET Training. And over the past 4 years, they've been researching and exploring different ways in which post-school education and training cloud, a new platform, can be set up to enable education in a digital world. It's a very exciting space to be, and I'm very honored to be on this launch group. As part of the growth, there are a few papers that they've written that I've gone through, and these sessions are talking about or through the different papers. I'm currently talking about the PSET Cloud Scenarios for the PSET Future paper. This is a very interesting paper where they have dived into the possible futures for South Africa and what that means in scenarios and what it means for post-school education and training. In their papers, they came up with 4 different types of bridges as an analogy towards what could be in the future. And this is what the discussions are over the next couple of weeks. I'll be talking about each bridge in a bit of detail and my understanding of the bridge and what the scenarios look like in terms of what we can prepare for. Please download the paper in the LinkedIn discussion below, the PSET Scenarios 2021-2030 paper, because when you download it, you can see what I'm talking about, and they've given some really, really good opportunities for you to be able to actually do some scenario planning within your business and within your company to launch your skills development into the future. Good luck with that. And this is a bridge over troubled water scenario. What the scenario is about is on the y-axis is the public sector response. So this is the governmental response to the changing environment. And this is in the perspective of the citizen as a person. So on the left-hand side, in terms of the y-axis, you've got if the public sector response to change in South Africa is quick or erratic. And on the bottom side is slow and no change. So as the public request things, either the government or public sector respond quickly and somewhat erratically, or they take too long, or there's no change. On the x-axis, it's the economic constraint to the change. So either there is an immense economic constraint, or there's a controlled economic constraint. And this is kind of the play on the first scenario, which is the bridge over troubled water for the post-school education and training. Now, let's unpack this. If the public sector is quick and erratic to move the change, and there's immense economic constraint, the 2 key things out of this research that comes up is 1, policy is changed to suit officials, and 2, the constitution is ignored. So what happens in this space for the citizen is, I call this a dazed and confused citizen. So this is a citizen who walks around, doesn't really know what the policy is. The policy keeps changing as the policymakers think that something is good. They kind of just let it roll out, bang, and the citizen kind of bouncing backward and forward, trying to understand what the policy means. Like, gosh, what's going on? And just as they understand it, new policy comes in. And the main part of the confusion is that when the citizen measures the policy to the constitution, there's no tie-up. And that's where this dazed and confused citizen kicks in. Okay. The second quadrant is you have slow or no change, and you have immense economic constraint. So this, in terms of bridge over troubled water between now and 2030, is you have a fear-driven compliance. This is where you do what we tell you to do, or we bring in the military to force you to tell you what we do. I call this the yes boss citizen. This is very much what we have experienced in South Africa and what you see in a lot of countries, in dictatorship countries around the world. The public sector, the government, don't really care about change. They don't want to do a lot of change. They see what's going on, but they force their hand. The economy is not growing. It's the constraint is immense, and basically you do what you're told, or we will make sure that you do what you're told. I don't really like one personally, but you get to decide what you think where you should be. It's a very interesting scenario. The third scenario is if there is slow to no change at the public sector, but there is a controlled economic constraint. So it's not immense. Economic constraint comes down, which means the economy can grow a little bit more. So what you have is you have your self-employed entrepreneur, but their goal is to pay me, not to pay my staff, not to pay others. So they're not looking to grow their business. They're not looking to bring on employees. They're not looking to grow. They're looking to do just enough work for them to survive. And what then happens is they tend to sell their services into the large corporates. So as the large corporates downscale and retrench, these self-employed entrepreneurs sell themselves to the corporates on quite a mercenary model. So there's less employed from the small, medium, macro enterprises, and the larger need is for large corporate and government as an employer. So what happens here is when the corporates and the governments are the large employers, they call the shots, they tell the government what to do, they call the laws, and all of a sudden policy and stuff remains the same because there's a comfort at high end of corporate, high end of government, and the local entrepreneurs are not really needed because they would kind of cause a problem. So I call this the me citizen. The last option is the quick and erratic response from the government in a controlled economic constraint. Now, although it's not entirely comfortable for quick and erratic to happen, there's enough brains within entrepreneurs to make that work for them and for the country. So this is your self-employed that want to build their communities. So they create their own companies, but they want to develop the community. So they use the community to help develop, the economy. It's policy that supports the SMEs, and it's policy that supports community governance. So at this page, the public sector are testing different types of policies. So it is quite quick. Sometimes the policies they put in place don't work and they have to fix it up. But there's a huge focus and a huge drive towards the entrepreneurial growth at community level. Less need for major corporates, less need for government employment, more growth at the local level. And this is what I term the gig economy entrepreneur. And this is a really good place to play. It's really kind of, I feel, a great growth opportunity for the country. Stability in the country becomes better because we're not relying on major corporates for mass employment. We're relying on small SMEs that can shift and grow, and they can turn their ships quite quickly. So people kind of create their own jobs as the economy emerges from within the community or the municipal level. Now, in this bridge over troubled water discussion from the PSET Scenarios, in this side, there's also a PSET Learner, which I find very interesting. So in the bridge over troubled water scenario, if you look at the PSET Learner, what you have is you have a very interesting scenario where on the education side, education is either competence-driven or private-driven. And there's a difference because private is all about qualification and certificate. Competence is all about knowledge and understanding, applied skill, and attitude or desire. If you measure on the second axis, which is equality, you have a very interesting scenario. So you have the fortunate 5 to 10% of the workforce or the citizens, and then you have the masses. The masses being the 90 to 95% of the the citizens. Now, on these two sides, you have a different type of education that's required, and it links to the citizenship on the previous slide. So in the competence-driven, fortunate 5 to 10% learner, you've got pretty much old programs, so legacy MBAs, PhDs, degrees, diplomas that have content slapped on top of training in a new competence world. So business is going, MBA, just update your content. We don't care because it's still an MBA. Do it the same way. And only your fortunate 5 to 10% of learners can actually engage with that. And if the PSET Cloud enables that type of learner, you're stuck in a non-balanced scenario because although education is competence-driven, it's not changing what drives the competence. So this is not business-focused competence. This is academic focused competence. It's where the universities are telling the business what competence should be, rather than business telling universities what competence should be. So content, again, is academic driven. Through competency, the learner is prepared for a world that's no longer valid, no longer exists, because businesses are building their skills in this direction. Competence is defined by academics in this direction. This is where the content, since business still requires university certificates, and so the learner comes into business in a space where they're actually not prepared for business, and business has to develop them. This is a competence fortunate scenario, and I call this the WTF learner. What? Learner. The learner doesn't really know what they're learning. They know they're just learning it because daddy or mommy or uncle told them to learn it. They've got a job. They want to stay in their job, and they will do what they're told. So content is not performance driven. It's qualification driven. Okay. The next type of learner is your private driven learner in the fortunate space. So this is job in mom or dad's company. Limited new courses are created because these need to be signed off by DHET. That takes 3 to 4 years. Once it's designed, by the time the course is signed off, it's already too late. It's already outdated. And there's no real need for change. This is kind of what I would term your old boys club learner. So I do a qualification, I do a degree, I do an MBA because it doesn't really matter what the outcome is. I know I've got a job in a corporate that I play in the right people are playing the right strings. I fit in there. I'm part of the Ivy League. I'm ready to go. Now, in this kind of space, you're still ignoring the learning opportunities for the masses. You're kind of just throwing content out to them, but you're still relying on the qualification or the piece of paper that the HR department needs so that you can get into an interview. And this is a scenario of 2030 that could take place if we keep going in the trajectory that we are going. Qualification is important from a very, very well-known university. That the university has the programs that take forever to actually get accepted. It's got to be accepted by the government because government says so and business must fit in. Private-driven for the fortunate few. We then have a different focus. And here's a shift where PSET Cloud becomes quite interesting because this shift is for the masses. So 95% of the learners. And this is your, for entrepreneurs who are not really focused, they're kind of just whatever. We're looking for money anywhere. All right. So competencies are defined at the DHET, academic. This is what the competency must look like. The entrepreneurs, if they find this, kind of prove in one way or another that they can do it. There's limited creativity here because the entrepreneur has to tick the box of DHET because the entrepreneur wants to get their business onto the vendor lists of the corporates. And if they tick the box on the DHET, they can tick a certificate box. And the corporate goes, oh, well, because you have a certificate, you must know what you're doing. The corporates are getting the tax breaks and the benefits and the BE spends. But your entrepreneur here is limited in creativity. They do what they're told by the government. Questions from learners around content is frowned upon. So don't ask us why the content is the way it is. We know that your business does it differently, but do it this way because that's the way you get into the corporates. That's the way you get your business to work. And this is a gold watch perspective. I will stay within a company. I will learn within a company. It's private driven. It's for the masses, but at least I can stay within the company, hopefully get my gold watch after 40 years. I call this person the conditioned learner. You learn to be conditioned. You don't learn to think to grow, and the economy takes a huge knock because of that. The last type of learner is for the masses that's competence driven. Now, this is a very interesting type of learner because this is where the business designs the current competencies. Now, remember, it's very entrepreneurial and every business defines its own set of competencies. So when you have leadership or management or decision making, a technology company might have a definition of that competence, but an oil company or a fertilizer company for the same competence might have their own definitions. It now explodes the market as to what content needs to be trained. Content is therefore created as micro-learning journeys for competencies. So every competence has its own learning journey. There's no need for DHET-governed qualification. This falls away. Because in this type of gig economy learning process, entrepreneurs are always updating their skills so that they can always provide good services to other providers or to other companies that need their services. The learner continually accesses new and updated content because providers are doing this. So the PSET Cloud becomes immensely valuable in this scenario because these are your gig economy learners, always learning, lifelong learning, updating their skills, offering ability to learn more, offering content, creating content, and applying the content in the workplace, ungoverned by Department of Higher Education and universities and old school structures, governed by business that's turning the economy around. And whether you go into municipal type learning or municipal type business opportunities or mass corporate, it works either way. And you have a far better inward mobility opportunity and a far better procurement opportunity where these highly skilled people come in for short moments of time within the business to offer very good skill to drive strategy. Okay, so this is pretty much the bridge over troubled water learner. If I go back to the previous screen, just to show you, you've got your dazed and confused citizen, your gig economy entrepreneur, your me citizen, or your yes boss citizen, depending on what the public sector does. And then on the education side, you've got your WTF, what the learner, you've got your old boys club learner, your gig economy learner, and your conditioned learner. These are all the possibilities for the bridge over troubled water scenario that was really well painted in the PSET scenario space.